I do need to ask the jury, make sure they can hear you. I'm pretty sure you were speaking clearly, but. You ready, Christy? All right, welcome back, everyone. I am aware that there's some popping in our speaker system. I'm sure it's coming from the state's table connection. Joe, why don't you just try and pushing it in a little tighter there at the box. Sometimes I think that box is got a little bit of, that's good. Yeah, I guess we're just going to have to live with it. All right, state ready to bring the jury and resume closing. You ready, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Halstead? All right, go ahead and line them up, bring them in. All right, when you may be seated. Is the state ready to call, jury? Defense ready to call? Welcome back, folks. Hope you had a good lunch. We're ready to resume our closing arguments in this case. Just to let you know, I am aware that there is some popping in the speakers. There's a loose connection somewhere. I tried to track it down over lunch and was not able to find that. Hopefully it's not too distracting. If it is, let me know, and we'll try to find another way to present the PowerPoint to you. I do want to ask too, I forgot to ask yesterday, but has everybody been able to hear clearly, Mr. Sanchez, during closing, everything else? Anybody have any difficulty hearing or seeing or listening? All right, very good. All right, Mr. Sanchez, you may resume your closing argument, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, when we left off, we were talking about the elements of premeditated first-degree murder, that the state has the burden to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt the essential elements for that offense, being that Joel Michael Guy Jr. unlawfully killed Lisa Guy, his mother, and Joel Guy Sr., and that he did so intentionally, and that he did so with premeditation. We talked about the premeditation in the purchase supplies. We talked about the premeditation in the notebook, the book of premeditation. We also went through the entries and we looked at the intentional acts of Joel Guy Jr. with regard to the unlawful killing of his father. And we left here, ladies and gentlemen, with the shirt that Joel Guy Sr. was wearing that was ultimately removed from him with a pair of scissors, cut off, stab wounds present. Again, this is a man who suffered at least 42 stab wounds, ladies and gentlemen. An intentional killing. And next, I want to focus on the intentional killing of Lisa Guy that occurred in the upstairs landing at 11434 Golden View Lane here in Knox County, Tennessee on November the 26th, 2016. We know Joel Guy Jr. had a plan. He had a plan with regard to what order he was going to execute his parents in. He demonstrated that in his book of premeditation. Clean up the mess from him before she gets home. He's looking for a window when his mother will not be present, when he can take care of his dad and wait for her to get home and take care of her. We know that Miss Guy checked out of Walmart on November the 26th, 2016 at roughly 12:18. She's captured on video surveillance purchasing items that are ultimately found in the foyer and the downstairs of the residence. We know that she makes it out of Walmart at roughly 12:19, and that Joel Guy Jr., the defendant, goes to Walmart at 3:35 the same day. The work has been done at that point. Lisa Guy, Joel Guy Sr. have been murdered. And how do we know that? We know that through proof that came in during the course of this trial. receipts that corroborate the items that were purchased, a receipt that corroborates the date and time, as well as the video. Ladies and gentlemen, these are the last moments of Lisa Guy's life. And you are watching her in the same clothing that she was murdered in, and that was ultimately cut off her body. Not a worry in the world. Little did Lisa Guy know. She had no idea of the terror that awaited her. She came in with the proof demonstrates through the front door, brought in groceries with what the proof demonstrates without the help of Joe Guy Jr., who at this point had cut hands. She was lured upstairs, up the stairwell, through the doggy door, and brutally attacked. We saw from Investigator McCord and Officer Ballard the blood present on the way up the stairs. And we submit to you that that blood was likely the result of Joel Guy Jr. bringing his mother's decapitated head down the stairwell, ultimately putting it in a stock pot and boiling it for days before it's ultimately discovered. Again, the crime scene diagram demonstrates that Ms. Guy came up the stairs, took a left, went through the doggy door, and was ultimately attacked and murdered in location A. We saw the items, the sewer line cleaner, the empty bottles, ladies and gentlemen, of sewer line cleaner, acid-based solution. Her clothing, underwear were cut off, her bra was cut off, her undershirt with numerous stab wounds was cut off, her sweatshirt that she was wearing moments before was cut off. And Mr. Joel Guy Jr. accomplished that with the use of a kitchen knife. And with regard to acting intentionally, ladies and gentlemen, what did we hear from Dr. Haas? Dr. Haas testified that Ms. Guy as well was disarticulated at the shoulders, at the knees. She was decapitated before she was placed in an acid-based solution and left to dissolve. What does that tell us, ladies and gentlemen? At least 31 stab wounds. I submit to you that is acting intentionally. That is someone who is trying to bring about the death of an alleged victim. Again, the judge will instruct you, what is acting intentionally legally? A person acts intentionally when it's the person's conscious objective or desire to cause the death of the alleged victim. Joel Guy Jr., the proof establishes in this case, acted intentionally when he stabbed his mother at least 31 times, dismembered her, and decapitated her. We saw the pictures of the back of Lisa Guy, and while they're hard to look at, they paint a picture. We heard about the tails and how these tails on these certain wounds are created and what causes those tails. And it's either the knife moving or the victim trying to move. We also learned that Lisa Guy had 5 stab wounds to her buttock, consistent with trying to get away. The diagrams that Dr. Haas provided us paint a picture. They tell us that not only did Lisa Guy have a tremendous gaping wound on her front, so did Joel Guy Sr. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that is for one purpose, and that is for this chemical-based solution to enter their main cavity to quicken the process of dissolving Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy. What else did we learn about the attack with regard to Lisa Guy? She, like Joel Guy Sr., had wounds that were at least 6 inches deep. And again, thinking to acting intentionally, stabbing someone 6 inches deep. Her injuries, significant injuries. She had injuries to her heart. She had injuries to her kidney, her spine. She had a hole in her back from an attack. She had injuries to her lungs. And if you look at the wounds on her back, that is not surprising. Dr. Murray Marks testified. You heard from him. And you heard about the injuries to her bones. Blunt force injuries with a knife entering with such a thrust that it cuts into her ribs, removes pieces of her ribs. You heard about the process of how Joel Michael Guy Jr. Decapitated her, how he did it awfully high on her neck, and he had to apply some degree of force to separate her head from her neck. Joel Guy Jr.'s own words in the book of Premeditation. Remove her clothes and take them with me for disposal. Well, he achieved half his objective, ladies and gentlemen. He removed her clothes. And that's demonstrated by the pictures that were entered in evidence in this case. Investigator Sandy Campbell with the crime scene for the Knox County Sheriff's Office. She recreated how the items of clothing were physically removed and made sense of it in a way that we could understand it. Her pants were cut in the back, up each leg, through to the top, stripped off her stabbed body. Her bra was cut. The rear of her underwear and the crotch area were cut. Her undershirt, evident, ladies and gentlemen, was cut. Again, at least 31 stab wounds or incised wounds of the back, right buttock, and left side of the neck. We heard from Dr. Hawes that she was likely attacked from the front and the back, as well as Joel Guy Sr. Lisa Guy had a serious wound that went to the muscle on her clavicle area, and the main attack was to her backside. Joel Guy Sr. had stab wounds to his ribs, and again, the main attack was to his backside. Joel Guy Jr. cut off his mother's sweatshirt, same sweatshirt she was wearing just moments earlier. And again, in looking at that through Sandy Campbell, evidence in this proof in this case, we can see that this sweatshirt was cut off. And what does Joel Michael Guy Jr. do after he kills his parents? He goes to tend to himself. He buys the requisite supplies he needs to treat his wounds that he obtained in a fight with his dad, Joel Guy Sr., who was trying to stop an assault, a murder. So with regard to premeditated first-degree murder, ladies and gentlemen, the proof has showed to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, the three necessary elements. That the defendant unlawfully killed Lisa and Joel Guy Sr. He didn't have a reason to do so. He didn't act in self-defense. The proof has shown that he intentionally killed them. Again, Joel Guy Sr. stabbed at least 41 times. Lisa Guy is stabbed at least 32 times. When we consider premeditation, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to belabor the point, but we have him starting up to 19 days before the commission of these offenses, these brutal murders, purchasing supplies that he intends to use in his grand plan to obtain $500,000. We submit to you that the book of murder, the notebook that he drafted with his DNA on it, that is corroborated by every piece of evidence in this case, we submit to you that that shows premeditation beyond a reasonable doubt. Next, with regard to felony murder. As you know, Mr. Guy is charged with felony murder in 3 counts, 2 for the thefts that are committed in the perpetration of the killing, and 1 for the killing of Lisa Guy in the commission of killing Joel Guy Sr. So the elements for felony murder are a little bit different, and what the state must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt is that Joel Michael Guy Jr., again, unlawfully killed Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy, and that the killing was committed in the perpetration of the theft. The theft in this case being the money transfers, the pills. The defendant, Joel Michael Guy Jr., in possession of his father's card that was used on the 27th to make 3 significant transactions. The 27th being a day after what the proof demonstrates the victims were slain in this case. Furthermore, you saw the wallets, ladies and gentlemen. You saw the wallets laying on the dining room table. You saw Joel Guy Sr.'s wallet empty. You saw on the video Lisa Guy shopping. She was in possession of that wallet just moments before she was murdered. You heard proof through Eddie Wassman at the Sheriff's Department, who specializes in forensic examination of electronic devices. You heard from him that on the 27th, in conducting a forensic analysis of the desktop computer that belonged to Joel Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy, that he came across transfers that were planned or happened on the 27th of November 2016. The first one being at 9:38 a.m. using card, ladies and gentlemen, 5773 for the amount of $1,025. 2 minutes later, same day, 9:40 a.m., same card, ending in 5773, was charged $1,589.78. 1 minute later, on the 27th of November 2016, card ending in 5773 was charged $2,051.03, all of which are going to the bursar operations. And we heard from Investigator Wassman that based on his investigation, he was able to determine that that was a payment to the Louisiana State University. Proof is established that Joel Michael Guy Jr. Was a student at Louisiana State University. Again, in considering the crime scene, ladies and gentlemen, what you have up here is the guest bedroom. We've seen ample pictures of the guest bedroom, all the items in the guest bedroom, but particularly next to the bottle of food-grade hydrogen peroxide with Joel Michael Guy Jr.'s DNA and blood on there is a card that belongs to his father, a card that was used a day after his death to make 3 money transfers. Close-up of that card. Again, last 4 digits, 5773. That is a theft that's committed in the perpetration of this murder, these murders. We also learned from Eddie Wassman that upon looking at the computer, there were transfers of Capital One, an account belonging to Joel Guy Sr., that occurred on 11/27/2016, 3:49 p.m. You have the SunTrust records before you, ladies and gentlemen. I would ask you to consider those. Look at those. They're in evidence. And what you'll find is that on the 27th, with a posting date of the 28th, a check card purchase from Joel Guy Sr.'s account was charged an amount of $3,090, particularly a organization, Submeter 1, in Louisiana. With regard to the pills, ladies and gentlemen, we've seen proof. Let's start with the kitchen. Let's start with the empty oxycodone bottle found next to the pot that Lisa Guy's head was simmering in for days after Joel Michael Guy Jr. left. We know that stove was on, based on the pictures you've seen, when investigators entered that residence at 11434 Golden View Lane. It doesn't stop there. We go up to the guest bedroom, and we have various prescription pills assigned to Joel Michael Guy with the address of 11434 Golden View Lane. We have other pills that have been prescribed to Lisa Guy with an address of 11434 Golden View Lane. With regard to the felony murder, the judge is going to instruct you on some law that's helpful when determining this type of charge. And essentially, what's relevant in our argument is that the killing may precede coincide with or follow the theft. So the killing can occur before the theft and still be considered as occurring in the perpetration of the theft, so long as there is a connection in time, place, and continuity of action. Let's talk about first the connection in time, ladies and gentlemen. What do we know about the 26th? We know that Lisa Guy went to Walmart. We know that Joe Guy went to Walmart. We know that they were executed on the 26th. We know that he had a plan to murder his father and wait until his mother was out before he murdered her. Connection in time. It's demonstrated here. We know that at 3:26, Joel Michael Guy Jr. is entering Walmart Turkey Creek here in Knox County, Tennessee, with bandages on his hands. We know that he used cash. We know that it occurred on 11/26 at 15:35, which translates to 3:35. Connection in place. Ladies and gentlemen, the proof has showed to you and demonstrated that all the offenses charged in this case occurred here in Knox County, Tennessee, specifically at the 11434 Golden View Lane address here in Knoxville. That would be the murders of Joe Guy Sr. and Lisa Guy, as well as the thefts. We know that Joe Guy Jr. didn't leave until the late hours of the 27th into the 28th. That's when he spotted heading back to Louisiana by the use of the license plate reader through Vigilant Solutions. Continuity of action. What this case shows us is that there's no broken plan after the homicide has been committed. There's no broken plan after the thefts have been committed. The only broken plan here is Joel Michael Guy Jr. leaving to tend to his wounds. But he wasn't done. He had a plan to light this house on fire. He had a plan to bring 4 5-gallon tanks of gasoline with him. He had a plan to use commercial timers to ignite a fire. He had a plan to light in electronics, namely a hair curler and a hair dryer to start a fire. He was not done. There's another count of felony murder that deals with the killing committed during the perpetration of the first-degree premeditated murder of Joel Guy Sr. Essentially, that's dealing with Lisa Guy being the victim in this count, where she is murdered during the commission of Joel Guy Sr.'s premeditated first-degree murder. And again, I don't want to belabor it, but we know that it's in the commission based on Joel Guy Jr.'s own words, his own words, from his book of premeditation. Again, what's relevant here, the killing may precede, coincide with, or follow the first-degree murder of Joel Guy Sr. and still be considered as occurring in the perpetration of the murder of Joel Guy Sr., so long as there's, again, connection in time, place, and continuity of action. We believe that the proof in this case certainly establishes that, ladies and gentlemen. Next, we have 2 counts dealing with the abuse of a corpse, namely the corpse of Lisa Guy and of Joel Guy Sr. And what we have to prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, is that the defendant, Joel Guy Jr., did physically mistreat a corpse in a manner offensive to the sensibilities of an ordinary person, and that the defendant acted without legal privilege to do so. In other words, he's not a medical examiner, he's not a coroner. He acted without a legal privilege to do so, and we have to establish that he acted knowingly. So what is the proof demonstrated to us with regard to the abuse of a corpse of Lisa Guy? The decapitation with thermal changes of head. That's abuse of a corpse, ladies and gentlemen. He didn't have a legal standing to decapitate his mother, Lisa Guy, and to simmer her head for 2 days. He didn't have a legal right to dismember or disarticulate Lisa Guy at the head, the shoulders, the knees, one hand. He didn't have a legal right to put Lisa Guy in an acid-based solution and leave her to dissolve. With regard to the abuse of the corpse of Joel Guy Sr., he did not have a legal right to disarticulate his father or dismember his father at the hands, at the arms, at the shoulders, at the hips. He did not have a legal right to then place his father in an acid-based solution in an attempt to dissolve him. Now, the judge is going to instruct you regarding what flight is, what the flight is of a person accused, and I ask you to pay attention to that, ladies and gentlemen, particularly as it relates to these facts. And essentially, you'll hear it again from the judge, but the flight of a person accused of a crime is a circumstance which, when considered with all the facts of the case, may justify an inference of guilt. Flight is the voluntary withdrawal of oneself for the purpose of evading arrest or prosecution for the crime charged. You will also hear an instruction on tampering with evidence, and I ask you to pay attention to that as it applies to this case as well. The judge will instruct you as to that. Last, ladies and gentlemen, look at the pictures in this case. The house demonstrates the love that the Guys had for their only son. Joel and Lisa Guy, they did love Joel Guy Jr. We've heard proof from sisters who testified they had a loving family. We heard proof that they supported their only son. In fact, the only reason Lisa Guy worked was to support Joel Guy Jr. while he attended school in Louisiana. Proof in this case demonstrates that Lisa Guy and Joel Guy Sr. suffered. They suffered a great deal. Think about the exercise room, ladies and gentlemen, the struggle, the wounds to Joel Guy Sr.'s hands. Ultimately, they didn't deserve his death. Their lives mattered. And we ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to consider all the proof in this case and render the only just verdict given these facts. We ask that you hold Joel Guy Jr. accountable and that you find him guilty as charged. Thank you.
Mr. Halstead, would the defense like to make a closing argument?
Yes, Your Honor. Ladies and gentlemen, I first want to say thank you again for sitting through this. I know it's been difficult, but we're close to the end. That weekend, Joel Guy was outgoing, friendly, and happy in a way Michelle Tyler had never seen him before. Outgoing, friendly, and happy. That was not a man about to commit a homicide. Outgoing, friendly, and happy. You saw it in the picture from the front porch. Smiling, happy. That's who Joel Guy was that weekend. He was not someone planning on committing a murder. And remember the facts of the case. His father was stabbed at least 41 times, his mother at least 32 times. That is anger, that is rage, that is not happy and outgoing. We heard family testimony that they planned to cut him off financially at Christmas. This was not Christmas. This was not when that was going to occur. That's why we have to look at every fact to see if this adds up. Because just from that very start, outgoing, friendly, and happy does not add up to what happened here. Rage, anger, and death. The phone call to Michael McCracken. Mr. Guy never says that he killed anybody. Mr. McCracken never asked him, did he kill anybody? There's really no reference. It's just kind of this snippet of a call taken out of somewhere else, but we don't know what it's really about. We know he's feeling sad. We know he's telling Michael this should be goodbye. But we don't know that he's committing or admitting to a homicide. Now, the state tells us to store videos, Ace Hardware. Well, you can see him purchasing the food-grade hydrogen peroxide. You can't. You can't tell what that is. You can't tell what any of those containers are from Ace. We don't have a receipt. We don't know what was bought at Ace Hardware. The notebook, they tell us, well, they did note DNA on the outside of the notebook. So that means at some point, someone touched the outside of that notebook. What about DNA on the writing on the inside? When you write, your hand's often in contact with the paper. Touch DNA would be all over that. That's the thing that you want to know, isn't it? Is his DNA on the part where there's a writing? We didn't do that. Page at 5 pages, we could have done that. Hand on the paper when you're writing. They didn't do that. And on the fingerprints, we know that if someone touches something, like I touch this, my print stays there. It stays there until it's removed. It's removed by my hand touching again, or by someone cleaning, or it's not removed. It can stay there. It doesn't go away. You heard what the officer said. Does the heat melt them? Does it dry? No, it can bake them in. So the fact that his fingerprints are at some point on some object doesn't mean that that's necessarily related to this homicide. And on the notebook, they also did not bring in a handwriting sample to say, yes, this is his writing. The burden is on them to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, and they didn't do that. His car being seen by vigilant technology in Mississippi. Newsflash, he did come up for Thanksgiving. Newsflash, he did go home. That tells us absolutely nothing. Clearly, we know at some point he hurt his hand, but that doesn't tell us when or how he hurt his hand. The fact he's getting medicine for his hand does not tell us anything about the homicide. And again, on the DNA, they get to pick and choose what they tested. Kim Lowe decided she just wasn't going to test some things that she decided weren't relevant. For example, the kitchen glove. Well, of course, if a kitchen glove's in a house, you might have used it at any point. So what's the significance of testing that? I said, what about the kitchen glove in the master bathroom? Do you cook in the master bathroom? Do you do dishes in the master bathroom? And that's where the bodies were? Don't need to test that. That's not going to tell us anything at all. The clothes of Ms. Guy, we're not even going to look at them. We're told they were cut off. That means someone's hand is coming into contact with the clothes, and we know exactly where they're coming into contact with the clothes because it's exactly where they're being cut. No need to test that for touch DNA. Didn't even look at it. But then, 10 days before trial, suddenly they decide they have to test 2 more knives. And suddenly, in a rush, they can get us 2 more knives worth of DNA. They pick and choose. We just don't know if it's all accurate. You notice we didn't have any questions for the medical examiner or the pathologist. We don't deny that this was a terrible, awful thing that happened to the parents. The question is, did Joel Guy do it? Not, was this bad? So we didn't waste your time asking additional questions about that. We saw a ton of pictures. It felt like we saw everything in that house 4 times. Picture, 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 video. None of it really had anything to do. Flight. Yes, he went back to Louisiana. That was the plan all along, wasn't it? Son going to come up for Thanksgiving, son going back home. That's all we know. We don't know anyone was chasing him back to Louisiana. And where did he go? Where was he arrested? At his apartment. He wasn't fleeing. He wasn't hiding. He went home. We believe the state has not proven any of these charges beyond a reasonable doubt. We ask that you find Mr. Guy not guilty.
Thank you, Mr. Halstead. Rebuttal, General.
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not going to go over every article of evidence that was collected in this case. You've been very patient all week, and you've heard a lot of testimony, and you saw the laborious process that we go through to introduce evidence. And I just want to direct your attention to that locker, and there are a lot of things in there. And Mr. Halstead, really, he kind of has a point that not everything, every tiny piece of each piece of evidence was swabbed and analyzed. And there is a reason for that, and it's called resources. But I want you to keep in mind when you go back there to deliberate about the evidence that you do have. And I particularly want to talk about the notebook because, I think what Agent Lowe told you was that she examined the notebook and took swabs from the place most likely to leave touch DNA evidence. And that was the surface of the notebook, which is, I don't know if I would call it slick, but it's something that she, as an expert and as somebody who takes samples and knows where to look and how to look for DNA deposits, she picked the most likely place. And she found it. She found the defendant's DNA on the notebook. And, circumstantially, ladies and gentlemen, when you consider that that notebook came from a backpack that was found in the room where his sister testified that he was staying on the Thanksgiving holiday, it makes sense that it's the defendant's notebook and the defendant's writing. I would also point out to you that inside that backpack were several books that you saw in Technician Sandlin published to you. And on the inside of those books was the defendant's name, Joel Guy. So the books that were in the backpack belonged to him. The notebook had his DNA on it. And the backpack was found in the room where he was staying. So you don't have to be, just an expert in logic to make the connections that the notebook is his. But I would also like for you to consider the writing itself in the notebook. And there are references in those writings, despite the fact that there's no handwriting expert here. And if we did have one, the defense would be saying that that's junk science and you can't prove it. But there are references in the notebook that indicate that the person who is writing this is the defendant. Why else would he say that his DNA would be found inside the house? I mean, logically, why would anybody other than the defendant write something like that in the notebook that has the defendant's DNA on the outside of it, in the notebook that's found in the defendant's backpack, along with other books that belong to the defendant? Throughout this writing, he makes references to things that only he would know about. His mother's insurance policy, the fact that he would be the beneficiary, the fact that he had done calculations to examine his parents' assets, his father's assets, his mother's assets, The language, all mine, I get the whole thing. I mean, who else other than the defendant would be writing these things in this notebook that has his DNA on it that was found in his backpack along with his books, the backpack being in the room where he stayed the weekend of these murders. So, and that's just with respect to the backpack. I would also point out that, his DNA is found on a number of other articles of evidence that Agent Lowe examined in places where, really, how could you come to the conclusion that anyone other than him is the killer? Why would his DNA be on all of the 6 gloves, all of them, that she examined? 6 gloves. She told you that she examined the stained side of the gloves, which indicates, blood, and the non-stained side, the inside where the gloves have been taken off, the inside out. His DNA. Also, on some of the gloves, his mother's DNA, which indicates that he was wearing gloves and indicates that at some point his mother's blood got on at least one of these gloves. So, why? Why would he be wearing gloves? I mean, why would he be wearing gloves that were bloodstained? Why would he have boxes of gloves in the closet of the room where he was staying that weekend? Why would he have a box of gloves on top of his dresser? Why would there be a discarded glove in the floor of the room where he was staying? Think about it, and think about the fact that he noted in his notebook that he needed to wear gloves. That was something that he considered, wear gloves and socks, because he's very conscious in his writing that gloves and socks will cover up or prevent the deposit of DNA evidence. Now, the state doesn't know and can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt when he made that notebook. But circumstantial proof shows that it happened before the murders, and that it happened as early as November the 7th of 2016. And you saw the video evidence. I'm not going to replay that, but we know that he went to several business locations, including the Ace Hardware store on November the 7th. And we know that that store was referenced on a note that was found inside the suitcase that was found in the floor of the room where he was staying on this Thanksgiving holiday weekend. Dan Boudreaux's Ace Hardware in Napoleonville, Louisiana. Okay? And we know that he went to a Lowe's in Gonzales, Louisiana, and made a purchase. And you can look at the videos yourself. And we know that he went to an Academy Sports and bought a knife, and that knife is the knife that was found on the bathroom counter of the guest bathroom that he used, according to his sister, Michelle Tyler. And we know that his DNA was found on that knife, along with, I believe, the DNA of, I think, his mother. So where else did he go in Louisiana? He went to a Home Depot, and he went to a Walmart, and you saw him purchase this tub, okay? And you know from Michelle Denison Tyler's testimony that she saw this tub, or these tubs, in his car on Thanksgiving weekend. So we know that he brought them up. And I submit to you that it's logical to assume that he had inside those tubs the chemicals that he had purchased in Louisiana. And I want you to think about, too, why would he bother to go to different stores in different locations? Why was he careful to purchase these items in areas outside of Baton Rouge? Baton Rouge isn't a huge town, but he could have bought all of these things in one place. These are the actions of somebody who is trying to avoid detection. He's trying not to call attention to himself. He doesn't want to purchase a huge amount of chemical products all at one time because that looks weird, and a clerk might remember that. You might remember if you sell gallons of muriatic acid and food-grade hydrogen peroxide and sewer line cleaner to somebody, a young man, that might be something that sticks in your memory. But if you buy one or two things at a time, it's unlikely that a clerk will remember that. And I want you to think about, too, why he used cash. It's not that common. I mean, I never have cash in my pocket. It's kind of unusual that he would use cash in every transaction, and I submit to you that he did that to avoid detection, to make it harder for the police to track his actions, to be able to establish a pattern and a chain of where he went in the days preceding these homicides. Ladies and gentlemen, there is abundant DNA evidence at the scene showing that the defendant is connected to these homicides. Abundant. And it wasn't necessary for Agent Lowe to test and swab every surface of every piece of evidence that you witnessed us introducing this week. Now, I want you to consider, too, that maybe you can't see exactly the things on those videos that the defendant was purchasing, but think about what we did see at his parents' house. There were bags indicating the names of the stores where he had gone. Walmart bags, Home Depot bags and products, Lowe's bags and products. So again, circumstantially, all of this fits together to show that he purchased those products in and around the area where he lived, and he transported them to Knoxville, and he did so with the purpose of getting rid of the remains of his parents. And why did he want to do that? It's about money. And that sounds so terrible to think that you could kill your mother and your father for money, but that's really pretty much what it all boils down to. And that is evidenced also by his writing, by the notebook. Money, all mine. He had made calculations. He had thought about it. He spent some time. I mean, it's sort of a meticulous account of his intentions. And in a case where somebody is charged with premeditated murder, and I've tried many premeditated homicides, usually you have to put premeditation together circumstantially. And many times I have argued to a jury that you will have to put facts A, B, C, D, and E together to prove this element of premeditation. It's not like you'll have a notebook or an outline or a diary entry that's going to tell you every time. And how ironic that I finally got a case where I have that. That's exactly what we have. We have basically what amounts to a diary that outlines a plan of intention to kill. And we have a motive, and there it is. So I want you to think about this motive for money in the context of this time. Now, Mr. Halstead is correct. One of the sisters, I believe it was Renee Charles, testified, one of the sisters of Joel Sr., testified that she knew her brother had plans, his intention for the future. He was going to let his son know during the Christmas holiday that he was going to be cut off financially. But the daughters knew ahead of time, and they knew, I think by as early as October the 28th, I believe one of them testified, that the parents were considering this, because you don't make the plan to retire on the spur of the moment. This is something that you think about. Believe me, I've been thinking about it quite a lot lately. You think about it days, weeks, sometimes months, sometimes years in advance. And this was a close family. They like to talk. And they discuss these plans, and you just can bet that Lisa guy, who was Mr. Joel Guy Jr.'s biggest fan, his enabler, his supporter, you know that she told him. She had to tell him in advance what he was in for, what was coming up for him. You know that happened. If they're talking about it with Michelle and Angela and Joel Sr.'s sisters in October and November, you know that the defendant knew about it, and you know that his mother told him. So he knew what was coming. And he's smart. He's smart enough to know that once his mom retires, once she quits her job, that insurance money is gone. He isn't getting that. He's not getting that. And he's not used to supporting himself. He's used to having the support and care from his mother, primarily, taking care of his needs, providing him with an apartment, with utilities, with a car, gas money, paying his bills, his tuition, paying for his books, paying for everything. He's used to having her pay for everything. And he wasn't about to let them cut him off. That was not going to happen. These people, they were not going to disrupt his comfortable life. He wasn't going to permit it. He would rather see them dead than let that happen. And that's what he planned, and that's what he did. And then he used their money, not just, it's sort of like a double motive. He wants to do it for the insurance money, but he also wants to get what he can while he can. And I want you to think about that too. He made these transactions after he murdered them, within a very short time period, which I submit to you is during the course of the homicides, because it's all part of the same incident. He pays his tuition in advance. He pays a bill in advance, which Michelle Tyler told you was his utilities. Michelle said that he paid his apartment rent in advance. He talks to Michael McCracken about paying his rent in advance. Now, why do you think he did that? I was puzzled over this. I thought, why in the world would he be so quick to pay everything in advance? Why would you do that? You know why you would do that? Because it takes a while for an estate to be settled. It takes a while for an insurance company to make the decision to give you money. He needed a cushion. He needed about 3 or 4 months of his bills being paid while he waited to collect. Well, he waited to collect on his mother's insurance. So that's why those things were paid in advance, and that's why he did it in a hurry. He did it during the course and commission of these homicides. Outgoing, friendly, and happy. Yeah, I bet he was. But he felt very outgoing and friendly and happy. Michelle Tyler told you that that was unusual. Okay, his demeanor on Thanksgiving was strange. He was usually distant. He was usually kept to himself. He didn't interact a lot with his family. He didn't have much of a relationship with his family. And there are reasons for that. And I think Mr. Stevens explored that with Mr. Guy's only friend, Michael McCracken. He lived away. He lived in Baton Rouge. He didn't live in Burgoynesville. He didn't live in Knoxville. He had no reason really to have close relations with people who were older than him and who lived in different places. Ladies and gentlemen, despite that, these were people who were close, a caring family, a loving family, and they all knew each other's business, and they all knew exactly what was going on. And they all knew about the plans that Joel and Lisa had to retire and to take a break from life, okay? And why would he be outgoing and happy when he had been distant from them in the past? Well, I submit to you it's because he was getting ready to to get what he wanted, to implement his plan. He wanted to deflect attention from himself. He wanted to be nice. He was playing nice. In his mind, he's thinking, well, I'm going to not give them any reason to suspect me. I'm not going to act like I'm mad. I'm not going to show them I'm mad. I'm going to make an effort to talk to the grandsons, my nephews. I'm going to give away my toys. I'm going to give away my Beanie Babies. I'm going to speak to Michelle. I'm going to interact. You know, I'm going to make this a nice holiday for everyone. So when ultimately the bodies are discovered, people are going to reflect back, and they're going to be able to say, well, you know, Joel Michael was nice that weekend. He was in a good mood. He was okay. But it was an act. It was a show, and it was to deflect attention from himself. Because if he had acted angry, if he'd had an argument with his mother, if he'd had it out with mom and dad over the fact that they were going to cut him off, I mean, how would that look when their bodies turn up later, or maybe their bodies don't turn up because he actually carries out his entire plan and is able to flush them into the public waterway. Mr. Sanchez was right. He didn't finish, okay? At some point, he gave up. He ran out of steam. He ran out of energy. You heard Dr. Marks. It's hard. It's hard work to get rid of two human beings. It was hard to kill them. It wasn't easy. And it's much harder work to take them apart, to cut off their limbs, to transport them into whatever vessel you bring to dissolve them in. It's hard work to lug all those big, heavy products around, and especially when you're hurt, because it wasn't so easy to kill dear old Dad. Daddy put up a fight, and the defendant got injured, and he basically wimped out. He gave up. He wimped out and left. And you might find it curious to see that on those Vigilant Solutions records, he actually is traveling back toward Knoxville at some point. So was he coming back to finish the job? We will never know. That's something that the state can't prove. All we can prove is that he left shortly after midnight on the 28th and was back in Baton Rouge when he was arrested on November the 29th. We can't prove what happened between those times. Let's talk about how hard it was to kill Mom and Dad. I want you to think about the last moments that Joel Guy Sr. spent on this earth. He was attacked by his own son. He had to fight him off, and it was a fierce fight. You saw the evidence in that room. I don't have to show it to you again. You saw his hands, both of his hands. At some point, that man had his hands on the knife that his son was using to kill him. And he knew it was his son. He faced him. He was stabbed in the gut. He knew his attacker. Think about that. Think about that. Think about the blood in that room. Think about that corner. Think about the thrashing about. It's no surprise that the defendant was hurt. It's no surprise at all he was hurt in that struggle. And he must have been feeling some pain when he had to kill his poor mother. There she was at Walmart at 12:18. How tragic that your last moments on earth were at a Walmart, buying bacon and sausage and food to prepare a nice breakfast probably for your dear son who was home for one of his few visits. There she was, purchasing things to take care of her boy, getting him ice cream, watching her put on her jacket because it was cold. It's very heartbreaking. Watching her push that buggy, knowing where she's going, thinking about her pulling up to the driveway, to that garage, the garage door that wouldn't open. We don't know why it wouldn't open. Most of us pull into our garage, and we, especially if the kitchen is next to it, most people don't bring their groceries in through the front door, do they? Don't you usually bring them in from the garage into the kitchen? But for some reason, she had to come through the front door. Did she have to knock at the door? I don't know. Was she able to get in? Probably. He probably took the doorknob and the realtor lock off after the fact. Okay, he had several hours to fiddle with the scene after he had killed his parents. But Lisa came home, and she lugged all of those bags of groceries in by herself, and she got them in, and something made her go upstairs. What was it? Did she hear the struggle between her son and her husband? Did she? Or did he call her? Did he tell her to come upstairs? Did he say, "Mother, I'm hurt"? We don't know. We'll never know. All we know is that when she got to the top of the stairs, there he was, and he had a knife, and he stabbed her, and she saw him. She was stabbed in the clavicle. She saw this boy, her only child. You heard the testimony about how much she loved him, how she worked only to support him. And he cut her up. He cut her up. And then he cut her clothes off her body. He cut off her jeans. He cut off her panties. He cut off her shirt. He cut off her bra. He took off her ring, and he left it in the floor. He cut off her head. He cut off his mother's head. He cut off his father's clothes. He pulled his jeans down. He piled it all up beside him. He left his cigarettes, Jill Sr.'s cigarettes, bloody pack on top. It struck me as an act of contempt. You know, here's your smokes, Dad. That's what he did. And he did it for money. And after he killed her, I don't know what time it was. It was probably sometime after 12:30. He left their bodies to cool off, you know, because he was hurt, and he had to go take care of himself. Do you remember seeing Lisa's purse on that? It was the kitchen table, not the dining room table, and her wallet. He had done that, okay? The police didn't do that. The defendant had gone through her purse and had taken out her wallet and his father's wallet, and he got money. Okay, he needed cash. Lisa Guy paid for the medical supplies that he bought to treat his hands that he hurt when he was killing his father. And then just as calmly as you please, he goes to the Walmart. He goes through the doors, and he goes to the medical department, and he buys his bandages, and he buys hydrogen peroxide, 2 bottles of it, 2 big bottles of rubbing alcohol, because you know what? Rubbing alcohol and peroxide in even small bottles can destroy evidence. They can clean your wounds, but they can also clean things off, like that K-bar knife, for example, that's on the bathroom counter. She paid for his medical supplies. She paid for all of this, okay? Because she was supporting him. And think about that. She paid for the drain cleaner she was dissolved in. She paid for the muriatic acid. She paid for the work lights that he thought he was going to need. She paid for the sledgehammer. She paid for the timers. She paid for the plastic sheeting. She paid for that garden hose. She paid for the small sprayer in the master bathroom. She paid for the big sprayer, the bleach sprayer that was left in the floor of the kitchen. She paid for those garbage bags. She paid for his socks. She paid for his red potato salad that he got when he was buying his medical supplies because he worked up an appetite after all of that, and he was in the mood for some red potato salad. Think about that. Think about that. She paid for the tubs that she and her husband disintegrated in. She worked all those years at Jacob Engineering to put him up, to keep him in his lifelong whatever program he's in at LSU. And you know what, ladies and gentlemen? She was still looking for a job in Seguinsville. Do you remember Renee Charles telling you that? She wasn't going to cut him off. She was going to find a job up there. She was going to keep supporting him. Oh my goodness. She gave him everything he wanted. And then she had the nerve to tell him that they retired and needed a break. Nobody else had a reason to do this, okay? No one else. And the proof in this case isn't strong. It isn't it isn't anything other than overwhelming. Overwhelming. And we ask you to consider everything in this case, and we ask you to convict him of premeditated murder, convict him of felony murder, and convict him of abusing the corpses of his mother and his father. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, jury, we're going to take one last recess. When you come back, I will read you the instructions of law. After that, you'll begin your deliberations to make a decision in the case. We're not there just yet, though, so please continue not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. You may leave your notebooks in chairs. This will be a 10-minute recess. Please go with the officers. All right, folks, take a recess till 2:20. 2:20 recess.